Hello, beautiful people. Happy weekend. I hope everybody's doing well. So this is your astrological forecast for next week, where we're going to predominantly be talking about the full moon in Gemini, which is coming up on Monday, the 27th. But I need to mention that Mars just moved into the sign of Sagittarius, and today Mars is squaring Saturn, just like Sun did a few days ago, because this, of course, is going to be active for this full moon in Gemini, just like all the aspects which I will be naming first that will be taking place next week, becoming exact next week, but all of those are actually active for this lunation that we'll be experiencing on Monday. So let's dive in. So on Sunday night, Monday early morning, depending where you are in the world, moon is moving into the sign of Gemini, preparing for this full moon in Gemini, and also Mercury as the ruler of this lunation, of this full moon in Gemini. Mercury is making a trine to North Node in Aries. So this is very important to notice because, of course, this is a supportive aspect which is just telling us that whatever is taking place is actually supporting us on our evolutionary journey going forward. And of course, side note, the last time a North Node and Mercury made a conjunction was in April this year, on April 6th, and the next time they're going to meet will be in March 18th. Just before the full moon in Libra lunar eclipse. Right after the full moon in Gemini, but on the same day on Monday, Mercury, the ruler, is actually going to square Neptune retrograde in Pisces, which again I'm going to dive more into when I'm going to do the analysis of the lunation. And again, the last time they two met was actually in March, 16th of March this year. Next time they're going to meet in March again on the 8th of March. Okay, then there's nothing much happening on Tuesday. On Wednesday, we have Moon moving into the sign of Cancer, and Venus is going to conjunct the South Node, which is again very important because Venus is the ruler of the South Node, and Venus is actually the ruler of the resolution node to Pluto square in the nodes, as I keep mentioning over and over again, because this is super important. It's something that's taking place this entire year. Pluto is the skip step, is squaring the nodes. There is no hiding away anymore. When Pluto is a skip step, the evolution is on the forefront because this is something that got overlooked. And pointing to the South Node being in Libra, it's all about our relationships, the way we're relating. And on Wednesday, the 29th, Venus is conjuncting South Node, closing the cycle that began between Venus and the South Node on 8th of November last year in 2022, which was just after the full moon lunar eclipse in the sign of Taurus, which of course at the time we had the North Node in Taurus and Venus was the ruler of the North Node. Now she is ruler of the South Node. So we can see how things are coming full circle because now we know ourselves better, we know our needs, our values, that we had the opportunity to reevaluate and find out more about during that 1.5 year transit while the North Node was in a sign of Taurus and the attention was on that. And of course now as Jupiter is retrograding in the sign of Taurus, we are reevaluating all these stories. But anyway, I want to again dig deeper into this when I'm making my interpretation. So of course everything is around North Node because North Node is the evolutionary potential. So the last time Venus conjuncted North Node that she was at the time the ruler of in the sign of Taurus was on the 20th of March 2023. And as we know, we had the two new moons in Aries, which one of them was the solar eclipse. So this was just before. And the next conjunction between Venus and the North Node that she's now not the ruler of, now it's Mars, will be happening on the April 17th, 2024, which will be right after the full moon solar eclipse in Aries that will take place on the 8th of April next year. So again, whatever is taking place right now is supporting us on our evolutionary path going forward. Venus is closing the cycle of what was before with regards to South Node. She's going to start a new cycle with regards to South Node as of Wednesday the 29th, and then she will obviously make a conjunction to North Node in April, and the new cycle will begin once again in a sign of Aries. So again, Thursday, not much is happening. Friday, we have Mercury moving into the sign of Capricorn. So Mercury will actually remain in Capricorn for a long time until February 4th, which again is very unusual for Mercury to be in one sign for such a long time. Usually Mercury changes signs twice a month, but Mercury is going to have a retrograde in Capricorn. Mercury actually going to station retrograde next month, and it's going to be retrograde until the 1st. So Mercury, I got it here actually. Mercury is going to station retrograde on December 13th, and is going to, which I believe is actually the next lunation, the full moon in new moon in Sagittarius, but I could be wrong. I don't have the dates right here, but I'm pretty sure it's actually the day when is the new moon in Sagittarius. Either way, Mercury is stationed in retrograde on December 13th, and it will remain retrograde until January 1st, 2024. So Mercury will remain in Capricorn until February 4th for that reason, because it's going to go retrograde. Actually, it's going to retrograde back into the sign of Sagittarius, and it's going to re-enter Capricorn in January, and then it's going to go direct, and it will move into the sign of Aquarius just on time for the new moon in Aquarius. So Mercury will move into the sign of Aquarius on February 4th, and on the 9th of February 2024 we have a new moon in Aquarius. So it's interesting that everything is happening to support us going forward, because by that point Pluto will already be back in the sign of Aquarius. Okay, Saturday, Mercury is going to sextile Saturn in Pisces, and of course Mercury will be ruled by Saturn, because it will be in his sign in Capricorn. So this is again a positive aspect. This is the last sextile before conjunction, again the one which is talking about these Aquarian qualities, about breaking free, wanting to let go of that which no longer serves us, because then it's culminating into Pisces, and then it's the conjunction, and then it's the closing of the cycle, and new cycle begins. So Mercury last made a conjunction to Saturn in March 2023. Mercury seemed to have been very busy in March, and also Venus. And the next conjunction will take place on February 28, 2024, which I need to mention, I can't help myself, will be after the full moon in Virgo, which is on 24/2/24. I have to keep remembering that, because it's a very important date. And yeah, the last conjunction between Saturn and Mercury happened in the sign of Capricorn. No, actually, yes. Let me think. 29 degrees, 25 minutes. Actually, no, I think it was in the sign of Aquarius. No, it couldn't. Yes, it was still in a sign of Aquarius, because, okay, so last conjunction between Mercury and Saturn happened still in a sign of Aquarius, because Saturn moved into the sign of Pisces right after that. So yeah, it was on 29 degrees of Aquarius. So the next conjunction between them will be in the sign of Pisces. So we can see how the cycle is literally culminating. It's literally coming to the close, because the next conjunction between Mercury and Saturn will be happening in Pisces at the end of February, right after the full moon in Virgo. Okay, so we got a little bit lost there, but we found it. So last conjunction happened in Aquarius, next one will be in Pisces. And that again is quite interesting, because of course being the ruler of this full moon, and we can see how things are being illuminating and culminating. And again, I want to dive deeper between, this relationship between Mercury and Saturn, because Saturn seems to play a very important role, with these lunations to do with Mercury, because during the new moon in Gemini that happened in June, that was right on a day when Saturn stationed retrograde, and now Saturn is actually square in the lunation. So there is definitely a lot of redefining going on with regards to how we perceive the reality. Okay, then on Sunday we have Venus square Pluto from the sign of Libra. Pluto, of course, is in Capricorn on the last degrees, 28 degrees 34 minutes to be exact. And actually, I kept saying that the last conjunction between Venus and Pluto also happened on 3/3/22, but actually it wasn't. 3/3/22 was when Mars conjuncted Pluto for the last time, and Venus also conjuncted Pluto on the same day. However, there was one more conjunction between Venus and Pluto, and that was on the 1st of January of this year, because of course Venus moves around the zodiac and in 1 year, so she doesn't take as long as Mars. So Venus square in Pluto on Sunday, this is again a last quarter square. It's a square that requires us, it's a crisis in consciousness. There has to be a shift that takes place more on an internal level, on a psychological level, because things are losing meaning. They're losing meaning because they're coming into culmination with the upcoming conjunction, which of course for Venus and Pluto will take place on March 17th, 2024, again just before the full moon lunar eclipse in Libra. And this conjunction, so the last conjunction between Venus and Capricorn, Venus and Pluto happen in Capricorn. The next one will be already in a sign of Aquarius in March next year. So again, we can see how things are culminating with regards to these Capricornian themes. Again, the last conjunction in the sign of Capricorn, like literally in our lifetime for Venus and Pluto, that took place at the beginning of this year. This is the last square of that cycle that literally started at the beginning of this year. And this cycle will be culminating in March. And like I said, it's just before the full moon in Libra. And we had the first eclipse in Libra now on October 14th, which seeded these new dynamics with regards to relationships. So we'll have much more clarity about what this all means at the end of March, March 25th, when we have the lunar eclipse in Libra, and we can see that Venus and Pluto are actually making conjunction just before that. So the new cycle will begin for Venus and Pluto just before that illumination, before that lunar eclipse in Libra at the end of March. So that's what I keep saying between literally now, the beginning of fall, autumn, and spring. These 6 months, it's like a lot of things will come into clarity for us, because there are a lot of things ending. So that's why there is so much we can't see, but we'll have much more clarity regarding what this all is about by spring next year, I feel, because the conjunction with Pluto will all, apart from Sun. Sun is the one that's going to conjunct Pluto on 29 degrees 59 minutes Capricorn on January 20th. But apart from that, everybody's going to make conjunction to Pluto already in the sign of Aquarius. So we're moving forward. And as we know, Pluto will have one more retrograde into Capricorn next end of summer, beginning of fall. Okay, so the Sunday night, week later, next week, already in December, because we start in actually new month next week, Moon will move into the sign of Virgo, learning and adjusting after everything that we experienced that week. And then on Monday the 4th of December, Venus will move into the sign of Scorpio. So we'll have another shift of the planets. Of course, we have Mercury moving into Capricorn on December 1st, and then on Monday, December 4th, Venus will move into the sign of Scorpio, where she will remain until end of December, until December 29th, and that's when she moves into Sagittarius. Venus doesn't like being in Scorpio. By the traditional astrology, Venus is actually in her detriment in the sign of Scorpio, so she doesn't hang around there for very long, but of course she's got a work to do. Scorpio being ruled by Pluto squaring the nodes, resolution south node, ruled by Venus. There is a business between the two of them, and it's interesting that obviously this is all happening at the same time as Venus square Pluto is taking place, the last one, which is about crisis in consciousness. Okay, so this is all I have with regards to the notes about, what's going on next week, because again, I don't want to lose already 12 minutes in, I don't want to lose everyone. If you already lost, then I'm sorry. If you're still here, then, I'm going to now dive into the chart of this full moon in Gemini, but this is obviously the baseline, because this is all of these aspects are present for this lunation that we are experiencing on June 17th. June 17th was the new moon in Gemini. So new moon in Gemini happened on June 17th, which is when this cycle started. This cycle which is now being illuminated, and this full moon in Gemini is happening November 27th, which is Monday. For me here in Mexico, it will be taking place at 3:16 a.m., 3:15 a.m. in the morning. So for you guys in the US, depending where you are in your time zone, it's either before or after. For you guys in Europe, it's gonna be just before lunch. And then further away you are in the world, but for all of us it should be happening on November 27th as far as I know, and it's happening on 4 degrees 51 minutes of Gemini. And as I already mentioned, the most important thing to do with this lunation is that it's squared by Saturn. So Saturn is in Pisces, as we know. Saturn is now direct, and like I mentioned already, on a day when we experience a new moon in Gemini on June 17th, it was the same day when Saturn stationed retrograde, literally just before the lunation became exact. So now Saturn squaring this full moon is interesting, because it's like, okay, what is this Saturn trying to tell us? And as we just experience both Sun and Mars making square to Saturn from the sign of Sagittarius. Of course, Sun is already in a sign of Sagittarius because, full moon opposition. And it's all to do with our belief systems, the stories that we are attached to, which is something that, again, I keep going on about in a circles. But Saturn in Pisces being squared by Sun and Mars is how Pluto acts consciously, as I said, as of, when Mars and Sun had the conjunction on the 18th, November 18th. Now Mars is behind Sun, which means that Mars is now again culminating to Sun, which is like, okay, there are all these stories that needs to end, because why? Well, because sneaky Jupiter that is actually still retrograde in Taurus until the end of the year, literally until 30th or 31st of December, depending where you are in the world. Jupiter is actually making an inconjunction. So sneaky Jupiter over here is making an inconjunction, blind spot to this full moon in, it's making an inconjunction to Sun. It's making an inconjunction to Sun in Sagittarius, and, Mars in Sagittarius, it's kind of wide off for that one, but it's definitely making an inconjunction to Sun in Sagittarius. So it's like, what can we see? What can we see with regards to our belief system that we attach to, that we potentially valued for a very long time, but now doesn't really have a meaning? So it's, with the full moon in Gemini, it's an opportunity to question it, because Gemini is all about curiosity. Gemini is all about a Mercury. The function of Mercury is accumulate information in order to make a connection. So Mercury accumulates all this information, then of course Virgo discerns, organizes it, and then based on that, belief system is being made, and then what no longer resonates, it's being let go of because of Pisces, right? So we have this Jupiter making an inconjunction to Sun, saying, what can we see? Mercury, of course, is in the new phase, still with Sun. Mercury is still at this point during this full moon. Mercury is still in a sign of Sagittarius. So Mercury, as the ruler of the full moon, is in Gemini, is in a sign of Sagittarius. And like I said, there is this square from Saturn, but actually on the same day, as I already named the aspects, Mercury is making a square to Neptune. And Neptune is again about culmination, is again about closing, preparing for closing of the cycle, because as I already mentioned, the conjunction is happening in March next year, right? And the last one also happened in March, during Pisces season. So there is a preparation for end of the story that started between Neptune and Mercury, sign of Pisces. Now again, the story is gonna end, new story is gonna begin in a sign of Pisces. But rather than looking at the Pisces from the victimhood mentality, this attachment to things that actually don't hold the meaning anymore, like what are we trying to let go of? How are we trying to shift this story? Because Jupiter is retrograde. And it's helping us to go over things, actually reevaluate our relationship to these things that we are attached to, because Taurus can be very fixated, very attached to things, especially like when it's things that we consider necessary for our survival. But is this still the truth? Because, Venus is in a sign of Libra. Venus actually, like I said, is coming into her square with Pluto. This is already active during this, during this lunation, because Venus is on 21 degrees, so she's already within the orb, within the 10-degree orb that we consider for square. So Venus is squaring Pluto already during this full moon in Gemini, which is again crisis in consciousness. There are all these crises in consciousness. Mercury squaring Neptune, crisis in consciousness. Venus squaring Pluto, crisis in consciousness. And then obviously with Sun and Saturn, because Sun is the center stage, you can say is the crisis in action. So what do we need to redefine? How do we need to rearrange the way we perceive our reality? Because a lot of it lost meaning, but we still attach to it because it's the familiar, it's the thing that we know. And again, I would like to just very quickly slip back to this new moon in Gemini that started this cycle, which is now being illuminated. And actually, by the way, the whole cycle will end during the next new moon in Gemini, which, by the way, it's happening on a 6/6 on June 6, 2024. So that's when this cycle will completely end. But now we are in the middle of it, so it's like the illumination. It's like, like what did we learn in these past 6 months? So why do I want to talk about this is that during the new moon in Gemini, we actually had Pluto square to Jupiter. And Jupiter at the time was in a new phase conjunction. Jupiter had conjunction just before that. Jupiter was already in a sign of Taurus, and it had conjunction with the North Node. North Node at the time was in Taurus, still ruled by Venus. So what's interesting about all of this, is that at the time, Pluto was making a square with Jupiter, because Pluto was actually back in Capricorn already, and it was still like it was out of sign square, but within the orb. And now, during this full moon in Gemini, because Pluto is now it's going to again be coming out of Capricorn, so it's gaining degrees, but Jupiter is retrograde still until the end of the year. So the two of them are they're not quite having a square yet, they're still not having a square yet, but during the next lunation, the new moon in Sagittarius ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter still will be retrograde at that time, they're again gonna have a square. So they're coming close to this square. At the moment it's still out of orb, but they're coming close to this square. So it's interesting, during the new moon in Gemini, Pluto was squaring Jupiter out of sign square, but valid because of the degree. So it was straight away telling us that there is something we need to adjust, because this square is a crisis in action. There's something we need to change, something we need to adjust, because things are not quite right. And with this Jupiter North Node conjunction at the time, new phase in Taurus, it's like, do we still value these things? Do these things still matter? And Venus and Mars at the time, new moon in Gemini, June this year, think about what was going on in your life, June 17th or around that time. Venus was in a closing phase with Mars at the time. Of course, we know that the two are not going to have a conjunction until next year in a sign of Aquarius, because Venus is just trotting behind. She cannot quite catch up with Mars because she had a retrograde in Leo. So they actually never made conjunction, but they were within degree conjunction during the new moon in Gemini, and they were actually both square in Uranus. They were both square in Uranus, and this was a crisis in action. So Uranus is in Taurus, ruled by Venus. This is just before Venus had her retrograde. Venus was retrograde in summer, but at this time she was before her retrograde. So Venus had no clue. Venus was like, la 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 la, I'm in Leo here, I want to self-actualize, this is what I value, I want to be the queen. And then she had a retrograde, and she went into, through this process of reevaluation. Because of course Sun was, it was in Leo, and then Sun was in Virgo, and that was like, okay, now we need to kind of adjust things, because Sun was like illuminating all this Leo, like, okay, how do you want to self-actualize? Do you, are you authentic? Because Sun at the time, during the time when Venus was in Leo, was the ruler of Venus, So we can see again, how everything is connected, So in the summer, just before Venus retrograde, Venus had certain point of view with regards to, okay, this is what I value. At the time, Venus was still the ruler of North Node. So it's this process of let's get to know ourselves. What matters to us? What is our relationship with our, to ourselves, self-love, self-worth, all these kind of things. So Venus and Mars during the new moon in Gemini were squaring Uranus. This was the first quarter square, which says crisis in action, crisis in action. And what happened recently? We had Mars opposition to Uranus. Mars in Scorpio opposed Uranus, like literally a couple of weeks ago, right? So crazy stuff here, like, can you see how this is all building up? It was a crisis in action in June between Mars, Venus, and Uranus in Taurus, which was saying something has to change here. And now we just had, the oppositions. Of course, Venus is going to make opposition to Uranus next month, because while she's in Scorpio, she's not there yet. But Mars already had an opposition with Uranus, which is the point of illumination again. So just as I was saying, during the Scorpio season, a lot of things got triggered. A lot of things were brought up from the subconscious to conscious for us to really, really look at, like, what is this? How is this preventing me from actually breaking free? Because there is all this luggage, all this baggage from the past, whether it's from your life early on, whether it's your like I said, ancestor wounding, past life, collective wounding, because Uranus goes deep. Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, they go really deep. They affect the collective. It's like an akashic imprint. They like imprinted in our DNA, in our memory. Pluto rules the DNA, but this is all impacting us collectively, which is why I keep saying that when there is something very tragic and traumatic happening in the world, we all have a somatic response to that situation, because we all been there in previous lifetimes. We all been there. There was a lifetime and that was your experience, and I truly believe that, which is why, or even if it wasn't directly, but it's all embedded in our somatic, in our DNA. It's all embedded in this collective memory, right? So Mars made the opposition to Uranus literally recently. When was that? Let me check my calendar if I can see that far. On the 11th. Yeah, 11/11, exactly. Yeah, a couple of weeks ago. 11/11, Mars made a opposition to Uranus. And that was just before the new moon in Scorpio, ruled by Mars and Pluto, of course. So we had this opposition that brought a lot of things to the conscious mind. We know for many of us, Scorpio season was quite the season, quite intense, no kidding. And now Venus, of course, is going to make the opposition next month, because Venus, as I mentioned previously again, because she's the ruler of the resolution node to Pluto square in the nodes, south node, Venus is trotting behind everyone, like making sure that, okay, let's just redo everything. Let's make sure that I'm doing it properly, not properly this time, but things are being shifted, things are changing. So yeah, so there was this square during the new moon. Now, obviously, Mars is still, no, Mars is now out. Yeah, Mars is now out of degree of the opposition, but it's still memory. There is still the memory of the triggers that came to the surface, because now Mars, of course, being in Sagittarius, it wants to give us the opportunity to redefine the story. Like, especially being squared by Saturn, because like I said, as I'm recording this, Mars just moved into the sign of Sagittarius and it's squaring Saturn. And Sun did the same, and just before they both, Sun and Mars, move into the sign of Sagittarius this week, at the beginning of the, like for obviously, Sun, it was a day earlier than for Mars. Actually 2 days earlier with regards to moving into Sagittarius, but they both made the sextile to Pluto from the last degrees of Scorpio. Both Sun and Mars made a sextile to Pluto. So again, this is supporting us on closing this cycle of Pluto's transit through the sign of Capricorn since 2008. What did we learn about the structure of our reality, about this externalizing of our power to the external authority that actually no longer works, that is no longer supporting us? So you can see, guys, literally when we look at the bigger picture, because we are in Sagittarius season, so we are invited to look at the bigger picture, to see the learning, to see the teaching in this experience. And with this Gemini full moon, literally that is giving us illumination of what the hell took place during the new moon in Gemini, which of course, we had the, the square from Venus. Actually, Venus was also squaring Jupiter and Mars. So Venus and Mars, they were both squaring Jupiter and Uranus. And Venus was kind of still within the degree of squaring the North Node. Jupiter and North Node had a new phase conjunction. There is a necessity for this new story to begin. Now Jupiter is working on that. What the hell is going on? Because Jupiter is retrograde, reevaluating everything in Taurus. At the time, Saturn was squaring Mercury as the ruler of the new moon in Gemini. Saturn was squaring Mercury. Now Saturn is squaring the moon, the full moon. So we can see again Saturn playing a role here. Neptune at the time was squaring. Neptune at the time of the new moon in Gemini was squaring the lunation. And this was, of course, the last quarter square with regards to the new moon and Neptune, which is crisis in consciousness. And like I said, Pluto was also squaring Jupiter, out of sign but valid. There were so many squares going on which were saying this all needs to change. It all needs to change. New moon in Gemini, we need to look at things differently. As we remember, during the time Pluto was in Aquarius, everything that passed through Gemini was making a trine to Pluto. So that was obviously by the, at the early degrees anyway. So, we can see how, there was this beginning of this process on June 17th. Of course, that all got even more upped up when the nodes shifted the month later on the new moon in Cancer. The nodes moved into Aries and Libra axis. So this was the preparation, and this was all happening after the second new moon in Aries, which was the solar eclipse, the beginning of the whole process, the beginning of everything. So the conception of the idea, like the 0 point, the unlimited potential, took place in spring this year. And then as we were moving into the summer, because obviously Gemini season was the in-between, it was the mutable season, right? When we were going from spring to summer, on southern hemisphere, it was from fall to winter. So things were shifting. Things were shifting in June. Things were shifting. It said things have to change. Mutable energy. There were all these squares. All these squares were taking place. The perception of reality, the values, how we liberating ourselves with this Leo energy. Are we being authentic? Are we following our purpose? Are we doing what we came here to do? Are we being happy doing that or not? And now we have in full moon in Gemini. So fast forward 6 months later. Full moon in Gemini, which is again happening after the eclipses, and now all the main players are still active in, just doing something different. Obviously, like I mentioned, Pluto is not making an exact square to Jupiter just yet, but you can already probably feel the pressure of that, because Jupiter is the ruler of Sun at the moment, and Sun is where the attention goes, because it's the life force, where things are illuminated. So of course it's in Sagittarius. What is the belief system? What is the story? What is the attachment to the story? Because Jupiter in Taurus retrograde, and Uranus also being there, ruled by Venus, and Venus is squaring Pluto. Can't make this up, guys. I keep telling you, seriously, when you hop on from planet to planet and see the connection, the network, how they all connected in this web of divinity supporting us, it's impossible not to believe that there is something, something so intelligent orchestrating this. And yet, once again, Venus is in a closing phase conjunction with South Node. The cycle is ending. The cycle of the South Node, of this externalization of the power, because you put someone else on pedestal because they are an expert, that is ending. There is no such a thing in in the age of Aquarius. It's all about equality. It's about individuation. It's not about you need to know everything, but just you do you. You do you. You have to discover what it is that you are and what it is that you want to do, because that's the Leo. The Leo is about you becoming you just being authentically yourself. And like I said, with the Saturn squaring this full moon, it's about have to redefine things. Venus in the last quarter square to Pluto. Things have to shift. Then there has to be a shift of perception. Things have to change. And Mercury, closing square, the crisis in consciousness square to Neptune. Neptune in Pisces, endings. Mercury is still in a sign of Sagittarius belief system, Jupiter retrograde, Jupiter making an inconjunction to Sun. There is something we can't see. We have to feel into this, even though there is all this energy being in a masculine signs, which is there is something that has to shift, things have to change. And once again, Neptune was actually squaring the new moon in Gemini all the way back in June, squaring it. So that was straight away telling us that things are shifting, things have to change. And yeah, all the other things are still the same. Chiron still in a closing phase conjunction with North Node that will take place in February. So we'll just keep, being at it until that actually takes place. And then they'll be in a new phase conjunction. Uranus, there's still the sextile between Uranus and Neptune, and between Neptune and Pluto. So there is still that roof, the little roof. We had the kite, literally all the way until September. But now the kite is gone, but we still have the roof, the roof of the kite, because Pluto is trine in Uranus. So we know that everything that's taking place, it's supporting us in going forward, because Uranus will be the ruler of Pluto for 20 years while Pluto is in Aquarius. So everything is supporting us, even though it might not look like that, it might not feel like that, but everything that's coming up to the surface. And I will share this in my personal story share in my practical application of astrology. But there is so much stuff coming up to the surface, and I know this is what's happening for most of us. There are all these things, all this unhealed wounding, because of course this opposition that we had between Mars and Uranus. Mars is, how Pluto acts consciously, is the personal planet, so coming into contact with Uranus, which is, the subconscious, it's the beyond, and then things became illuminated because it was the opposition. During the new moon in Gemini, it was the square. It was saying, crisis in action, things are going to change, but now they became illuminated, so now we know what needs to change. And all these activations to Neptune, like Pluto is like Pluto is sextile in Neptune, and this is between Pluto and Neptune, this is the Taurus, the crescent, the waxing crescent, the first one, the sliver of the moon, which is telling us that this is, what we're learning about our, our values, what matters, what we want to do, what we want to grow. It's like these emperors. What do you want to grow? How do you want to be abundant? What do you want to manifest? So where are we? I keep flicking between the two lunations and getting myself confused. So anyway, Pluto is actually trine in moon. So this is the interesting thing, isn't it? So Pluto, apart from all the other things that are happening, especially the square from Venus, which, as I mentioned, is going to be coming exact on Sunday, next Sunday, which is what? The 3rd, I believe. 3rd of December. So the exact square will take place on Sunday the 3rd. So this is even that's why it's even more tense, because it's the build up towards it. But actually, Pluto is making out of sign trine to moon. It's making out of sign trine to moon. So Pluto is supporting it. So once again, it might not make sense, logical sense, because Jupiter is making in conjunction to Sun, right? And Mercury is squaring Neptune, so there could be a lot of confusion and disillusionment, and again feeling like victimized or lost, like nothing makes sense and all this, because Jupiter is still retrograde. Jupiter is making in conjunction to Sun, in Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter. So Sun is obviously being influenced by Jupiter being retrograde for the entire time. Sun is in Sagittarius, because Jupiter is not going to station direct until after. Sun will already be in the sign of Capricorn by then. And so Mercury is obviously still at the moment being ruled by Jupiter. So Mercury is making a square to Neptune. Things might be unclear, because if you let go, and this is again the teaching of Dr. Joe Dispenza, but I keep mentioning his his teaching, that for you to create a new reality, you need to become a new personality. Your new personal reality is affected by your personality. So to create a new experience, new reality, whatever it is that you want to create, you have to become someone different. And our thoughts and our belief system impact who we are, and who we are impacts our thoughts and belief systems. It's like vicious cycle, and these things have to change. And that's why we have these squares. Because what is square? Square is a tension that requires change. And whether it's a first quarter square, which says you have to take an action, learn something, whatever, or is this crisis in consciousness, which is our consciousness, which is our mind, our mind, things have to be shifted. And obviously Gemini always represents choice. So with this illumination, with this full moon, it's saying, okay, now you know what you didn't know in June. And that was, like I said, just when Saturn started its retrograde. But Saturn finished retrograde now. Saturn is now direct. So we know something we didn't know before. Because, of course, Pluto was also retrograde, and Pluto is ruled by Saturn. But now they're both direct. And actually, Neptune is just about to station direct also on December 6th. So for the new moon in Sagittarius, Neptune will be already direct. But funnily enough, Mercury will be retrograde. So anyway. So with all these activations to Neptune being obviously activated during the new moon in Gemini by squaring the new moon, and now Neptune is being activated by square from Mercury, that is the ruler of the full moon of moon at the time. There is these things that have to shift. So we might have learned something, taken an action physically on something, because obviously Venus and Mars were in Leo in a square to Uranus. Something had to take place, something had to change, tangibly, physically. in manifestation, for us to have this experience that triggered all this stuff coming from subconscious to conscious. But now that we know, now that things are becoming illuminated, even though they might be confusing and not make fully sense, things have to shift like on a different level, not on a level of like, okay, let me go and I don't know, do something, but it's on the level of how we perceive the reality, because it's this Sagittarius is our perception of reality. It's the lens through which we see the world, you know. And that's why I always keep saying that Sagittarius comes before Capricorn, because that how you perceive your reality creates your reality, you know, like what you believe you manifest, or whatever you believe you find the proof for, you know. It doesn't matter what it is, you find the proof for it either way, because of the law of attraction, you know, like likes attract likes. So, you know, with this Pluto coming again into the square with Jupiter, because Jupiter retrograde, and that's going to be the story for the next lunation, the new moon in Jupiter, new moon in Sagittarius ruled by Jupiter, which of course is about new stories, right? So with this illumination of what we know and illumination of this stuff that came to the surface during Scorpio season, which was so intense, profoundly intense for many of us, whether something happened on a material, tangible level, or just within, you know, within how you perceive your story, your existence, we have a choice. We can make a new choice, because I mean, Pluto is trining Moon, and Moon is in Gemini, and Gemini is talking about choice. It's like this multidimensionality, these multiple options, this variety of options that we can choose from. It's just a matter of, are we, you know, going to stay like loyal to this past story that lost meaning, and it's not even necessarily in alignment with what matters to you now, but maybe we just never had the, you know, never gave ourselves the time and space to question these things, to actually look at it and say like, oh, is this really what I want? Is this really what matters? Which I feel is what for many of us was, you know, transpiring when Venus was retrograde in Leo, because Leo is your purpose, is your authenticity, is your creative self-actualization, is your childlike innocence. So Venus went through that in summer, and now Venus being the ruler of the resolution node square in Pluto, Pluto squaring the nodes, Venus squaring Pluto. So of course that means that you know, and like I said, Venus is coming into closing phase conjunction. Well, Venus is in a closing phase conjunction, coming into the exact conjunction with the South Node only 2 days later, on Wednesday, on 29th. And then the new cycle will begin. And Venus is in opposition with North Node, which, as I mentioned already, Venus will conjunct in March. Yeah, right, March, just before the eclipse season. Ruled by Venus in case of Libra. Yeah. So yeah, so there is a lot available to us. Like I said, Mars is in a closing phase to Sun now, in the sign of Sagittarius. By the way, I don't know whether I mentioned, probably didn't, because I mentioned so many things I forget. Mars is going to be in the sign of Sagittarius until next year. It's not going to move into the sign of Capricorn until January 4th. So that will be after Mercury already went direct, because Mercury is gonna be retrograde and then it's gonna, you know, go direct on January 1st, but it's actually going to be in a sign of Sagittarius. So this is when Mars on the 4th, I believe, right? Let's see, where are my notes? Yeah, 4th. Mars on the 4th of January 2024 is going to is going to turn into is going to move into the sign of Capricorn. So Mars is going to be in Sagittarius for the entire December. So Mars being in a closing phase to Sun, you know, trotting along, is saying that again things have to close, they have to end, because of these Sagittarius qualities, because of this of these stories, because of these perspectives of reality that we adopted, in many cases just being projected onto Libra, you know, projected onto, reflected, you know, we were the reflection of somebody else's projection. And Jupiter being retrograde is making us to reevaluate all that in Taurus in a tangible way. Like this is especially happening when your boundaries are being crossed, you know, like with the Saturn squaring this lunation. There might be things taking place that will cross your boundaries. Your boundaries will get crossed, which again will help you to actually redefine, and tangibly experience what it is that doesn't hold a meaning anymore, or where things are too underdefined, like boundaries, for example, because Saturn rules boundaries, Capricorn rules boundaries, and it's again about this emotional maturation, about taking responsibility. So whichever way you guys want to look at it, at this lunation, I think I mentioned everything by now. Jupiter, of course, closing phase conjunction with Uranus. Now they're a little bit too far apart, but that's going to change when Jupiter goes direct at the end of the year. So next year, when they have conjunction, Mercury, being in a new phase to Sun, figuring out new perspectives, how to see the reality from new point of view, because Sun is what's happening with Sun. Well, no, there is no inconjunction. Uranus is just making not Uranus, Jupiter is making. There is just this inconjunction from Jupiter. Yeah, it's the it's the inconjunction from Jupiter to Sun, but Uranus is too wide. Yeah, it's too wide for opposition now. Even opposition between Sun and Uranus and Mars is too wide. It's just now moved away from it. But Venus is still opposing Chiron. Chiron being the wounded healer, this fear of moving into this new direction, that's still present during this lunation. So again, we have to have a compassion for ourselves and understanding that, it is, it is unprecedented times. It is the path less traveled, or even the path that we heading towards not being traveled, so of course there could be fear and all that, but Chiron is still retrograde, so it's an opportunity to take it inwards and ask questions, because Mars is the ruler of Chiron, closing phase conjunction with Sun, again takes you back to Jupiter. Jupiter is also retrograde. So it's again asking questions, questioning the stories, questioning the narrative, stop and think. Why am I attached to this? Is this even my story, or is it his story, history? And is it still what you value or not? Is it actually reflecting your relationship, true relationship to yourself? Are you being authentic? Are you being able to follow your North Star and live a life in alignment with what matters? And if not, then how can we change that? How can we let it go and replace it with something that has a deeper meaning? So yeah, like I said, whichever way we look at it, it just keeps pointing to the same thing, the same story, the same in a sense baseline, which is about this culmination of the Pluto in Capricorn, external authority that kept us feel safe and secure for the longest of time, but we had to give our power away in order to have that sense of safety and security, which no longer resonates because Saturn is now in Pisces. So Saturn is saying that no, now it's time for you to actually take control of your life. And Saturn squaring this lunation, creating that pressure and saying, what are you going to choose? What timeline, what direction, what state of mind, what belief, what storyline are you going to choose? Because at the end of the day, it's up to you. I mean, Venus is in the closing phase with the South Node. They're just about to, start a new cycle between the two of them. Venus is opposing North Node. And North Node is ruled by Mars in a closing phase conjunction with Sun in Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter, retrograde in Taurus, ruled by Venus. And we see how everything is just gonna in hoops and loops and cycles. So what are we shifting? What are we changing? And Mercury squaring Neptune. How do we need to shift the perception, the way we gather information or how we use the information? So anyway, so that I feel is the core message of this full moon in Gemini. I would look back to June, what's been going on in your life then, which is now becoming illuminated. This is with regards to how we think, how we perceive reality, our stories, that we are attached to, how we live our lives, attached to what, and is it in alignment with our values and all these things that we actually came here to experience, like it's that, because there's no right and wrong, which is why, Gemini offers you so many options, because we are all unique. We are all having our own individuated, unique experience, and this is how it should be. That's why when we are meant to be, when somebody tries to put you in a box and conditions you that this is the one and only way, and this is, how you have to experience this reality with regards to anything, whether it's religion, culture, whatever traditions, right? Any of these. I mean, moon is in Gemini. Moon in Gemini is like, whatever way, there is all this multiplicity of options, all these timelines available, you decide. And moon being ruled by Pluto is like supporting it 100%, Venus is squaring Pluto, like, no, things have to change. We cannot externalize power to ask other people to tell you how to live your life, or what to believe, how to believe, and all these kind of things. Everything is being under question at the moment. Like, literally, this is like the biggest investigation of your life, where everything is being taken, for analysis and question and redefine, because there are all these squares, there is all these squares. There is obviously this opposition because it's a full moon, and Venus opposing North Node. North Node obviously is our evolutionary potential, ruled by Mars, again, closing phase conjunction with Sun. Story is ending. Jupiter will be having conjunction with Uranus. Story is ending. Mars just had the opposition with Uranus. Illumination of the story that's gonna be ending next summer. Mars and Uranus are going to have a conjunction, right? And Pluto all the time is just like, I'm just going to support this moon over here that is in Gemini, saying, I want a new choice. I want something different, right? So and Mercury is in a new phase to Sun. So you decide. Literally, it's up to you. And we don't have to know all the ins and outs and the step-by-step process, but there's a story called life. You learn and adjust, and especially if there is something that is new phase, Aries quality, nobody can tell you, because you have to have the experience. You cannot go from Aries to Capricorn. It doesn't work like that. There has to be the whole experience, the in-between that takes you to that point. It is like the hero's journey, like the fool's journey, like just the fact, which I keep saying, the day when the North Node moved into the sign of Aries and Mars had become the ruler of North Node, Mars was in Virgo. And this is going to be influencing the entire cycle, while Mars is the ruler of the North Node. It's about the hero's journey. It's about the learning, adjusting, making mistakes, which is not really a mistake, because nothing is ever wasted in the universe. Everything's got a purpose and a meaning. And it's just about putting it into practice and making a change, because these squares, this time there is many more trines and sextiles than squares. Like I said, Pluto is sextile in Neptune. Neptune is sextile in Uranus. So the outer planet, the evolutionary multi-generational planets, they supporting each other. They're like, we going for this. On a human level, it doesn't feel comfortable at all. Because for us, humanly being, three-dimensional, having three-dimensional experience, being divine being, we get attached, we all get attached to things, like myself included. I'm Taurus sun. I get attached a lot. So it's like, having all these attachments to the experience, to the story, to the things we enjoy, and like, let's not question anything, let's just keep going and stuck in a comfort zone, and it's the thing we know. But with this moon, squared by Saturn, and Mercury, the ruler, squaring Neptune, and Venus, the ruler of the South Node, just about to have a conjunction with it, squaring Pluto. I don't think so. I don't think that there is any further we can go with this. So that's why it's saying, okay, in 6 months, you had the opportunity to experience a lot of things. A lot of things got triggered. A lot of things got brought to the surface. What choice are you going to make now? Literally, to me, this is what the chart is saying. But, of course, being fully embedded and attached to our stories, it is not easy. And I'm in no way saying it is. I'm just saying how I perceive this lunation from my perspective of reality, my personal story, my subjective perception of reality, which like I keep saying all the time, and I put it in my disclaimer, this is just how I see it. I'm not saying this is the universal truth. You can see it completely differently. You might listen to 10 different astrologers, they all will tell you a different story, but you know, this is how I perceive it. So anyway, guys, super long video, you know, because Mercury talking a lot. So I'm gonna close it at this. As it is the Black Friday weekend, I do have a special offer going on for 3 of my most popular readings, your natal chart, your solar return, and my special service, which I call Astro Spiritual Guidance, where we look at the lunar returns, the current transits, pull some cards, tarot cards, oracle cards, all these kind of things. But to have this done, you kind of need to already have done your natal chart. Like the natal chart is the baseline. Always start with the natal chart, because if you don't understand your natal chart from the evolutionary astrology perspective, the transits and all these other things won't really do much, because what you evolve in is that the baseline, which is the natal chart story, right? So if you're interested, you can find the offering. Well, the offering is actually that you change the price on my website, because you have to type it. So it's a normal price is 111. At the moment is 88 until the midnight on Monday, which is the Cyber Monday. So if you guys interested, get in touch, or you can just email me. But yeah, so this is what's going on. Once again, I hope that you all okay, you enjoying your weekend. And yeah, if you like this video, please like, subscribe, share, whatever, to support my work, support my channel. I always appreciate that. And have a wonderful weekend, and I will speak to you again soon. So sending much love to everyone, and bye for now.